Whoa, hey everybody. Oh, it's been a long weekend. How has your weekend been? I traveled this weekend from Greensboro all the way, believe it or not, all the way to Pakistan. Well, Pakistan, India, kind of the border area. And you can see right behind me, sorry, it's a desert area, so I'm a bit parched. Let me just drink a little water here. Right behind me, you can see this is an image of the Indus Valley River civilization. How many of you have heard of the Indus Valley River Valley civilization? If you haven't, that's okay, because that is the topic of today's lecture. Well, let's get started. In the wonderful world of the ancient River Valley civilization captured through the magic of Zoom. All right, just a reminder, this class, we're focusing on this region of the world called South Asia. And we're looking at the religions found in India, Sri Lanka. Don't think the Maldives is on this map. Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. I think I mentioned Nepal already. If I didn't, Nepal also. We are asking this question here of what is Hinduism? Hinduism is the very first religion we're studying together in this class. Well, here we have two very common images associated with Hinduism. We have the holy symbol Om. And we're going to go into more detail what this symbol means, as this is going to get when we do our lecture on yoga and the Upanishads. But for now, this is a common symbol of Hinduism. Here we have the remover of obstacles, the Lord of Beginnings, one of the most popular iconic figures of Hinduism. This is Ganesh. Well, as we're trying to figure out, and we saw this in last week's discussion board, last week's reading, and last week's video on 330 million gods. Some say that there's 330 million gods in Hinduism. Some say there's only one divine essence, and that divine essence is symbolized by Om. Well, what I want to do in today's lecture, and in the next lecture you'll see in this module, is explore kind of the historical foundations of this thing that we call Hinduism. So Hinduism is kind of a broad umbrella term. We really don't see it being used until the 19th century. Within this umbrella term, we find a wide variety of practices and traditions that developed over two historical time periods. This week, we're going to look at two historical time periods in particular. We're going to look at the time period between 2500 to 1500 BCE. For those of you who might not be familiar, BCE means before Common Era. It's equivalent to BC, before Christ, but doesn't have as much of a religious connotation. Instead of AD, which means roughly year of the Lord, we say CE, Common Era. So BCE and CE. And we're also going to look in our next lecture at the Vedic period. That's from 1500 to 500 BCE. Let's begin our journey. So what we're going to talk about first is civilization. Well, we're living in a civilization. I think so. Are we? What makes a civilization? Really, I'm not so sure. I guess like towers and technology, transportation. So when we think of the history of humans, we often think of the rise, the fall of old and new civilizations. Let's take a look. Anybody can, let's play, we're playing a game now. Can you recognize what civilization this image is from? This image is of the Parthenon, and this is the ancient Greek civilization. Anybody recognize this image? It is Stonehenge. And as far as I know, what civilization this is associated with is an object of debate. I've even heard some theories, and there's no real scholarly evidence to support this, that ancient aliens built this structure. Have any of you ever seen ancient aliens or modern aliens? I've always wanted to meet space aliens. That'd be kind of cool. All right, we are continuing our tour of the world and seeing the great civilizations of the past. And next up, guess that image. This is the Colosseum of ancient Rome. Next up, this is in South America. Anybody want to guess this is the ruins of which ancient civilization? This is the Incan civilization. We got some kind of wall here. But not just a wall. Looks like a really, 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 really great wall. So what civilization do you think this would be? This would be the civilization of ancient China. We have, this is a pyramid structure associated with this indigenous group or this native group. This is an Aztec pyramid. Here we have the Sphinx, and what civilization? It's ancient Egypt. All right, so how do you follow the movement of human civilizations? How would you follow? So we're going around on this great journey of the world. I've landed right here in the Indus Valley civilization. What do you think led me here? Or what do you think led our ancients, our ancestors to go places? What do we want to follow? You follow one thing to understand the movement of humans and the relocation of humans. While I have a sip of my Aquafina, I'll let you guess what that is. You follow the water. When we talk about our ancient ancestors, we talk about 4 great river valley civilizations. These are, well, let's take a look here. This is the river valley civilization found between the Meso, the land between 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is images of ancient Mesopotamia, including the gates of Babylon. Again, we can see here, this is the Tigris, the Euphrates, roughly in modern day Iraq and parts of Syria. This is also where many of the biblical patriarchs of the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament come from. Adam, for example, came from this area of Ur in ancient Mesopotamia. All right, where are we? We are in ancient Egypt. We can see a scroll of the Book of the Dead. And what river, what famous river do we find here in ancient Egypt? This is the ancient Tigris River. All right, and then we have the Yellow River Valley civilization. And the Yellow River is in ancient China. Here we see a symbol of heaven. We can see an ancient emperor and a veneration, paying special respect to the shrines of ancestors. Now we come to our part of the world. And in our part of the world, we are coming to the Indus River Valley civilization. I've spent a lot of time working in this part of the world for my research, certain areas of it at least. It's a really big, long area. And that's where we are today, Indus River Valley civilization. The study of the Indus River Valley civilization or civilizations, most of what we're relying on is a field called archaeology. So this is the study of human history and prehistory through the excavation of sites and the analysis of artifacts and other physical remains. And an artifact is an object made by a human being, typically an item of cultural historical interest. So I hope everyone here is dressed appropriately, as we are about to start digging and excavating and trying to find out the ancient religion of the Indus River Valley civilization, which many believe is the beginnings of the earliest fragments of what will evolve into modern day Hinduism. All right, so just a quick note on this one is, as ancient as this is, going all the way back to 1500 BCE, it wasn't until really 1842, around the middle of the 19th century, that we start to find remnants of this civilization. This is 1842, and there were subsequent excavations by different archaeological organizations. All right, now let's think of the two great cities of the world, today. What's an example of a great city? A big giant city. I know, New York, Tokyo. The two great cities of this time are Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. And it had roughly 50,000 inhabitants, which you may think, well, 50,000, that's pretty small. Well, back in 1500 BCE, that would be equivalent of a giant megalopolis of today. You know, just thinking about population size relative to the population of the world. These were major cities. This is Mohenjo-daro. You can see like a dome-like structure in the center. And these are just some of the other cities we have. And so these names were actually given during the archaeological expedition. We don't actually know what the people who lived in these cities would call themselves. And we'll figure out why we don't know that soon. So Harappa, Marghar, Mohenjo-daro, and Lothal. Most of these cities are in what's now modern day Pakistan. Lothal is in modern day India. All right, here's some of the things that we know about this civilization. So again, the time period was 2500 to 1500 BCE. So very old civilization. Recently discovered, we talked about the mid-19th century. It was a great civilization with complex cities, really fancy irrigation system. At its peak, huge number for the ancient world, and that's 5 million inhabitants. 260,000 square miles of territory. And this is among the major economic powers of the ancient world. And how do we know that? Well, part of it is because we find materials from this civilization in ancient Indian subcontinent. We find items from this part of the world in Egypt, in Mesopotamia. Why? How would those items get there? Well, trade. So we have evidence of trade taking place between this part of the world and others, and massive amounts of trade. So again, trade connections between Mesopotamia and Egypt, and it mysteriously, poof, disappears. Where would it have gone? We're going to watch one video which has a plausible theory, but there's been different ideas. Some say that this civilization was conquered, some say famine, some say maybe another civilization came in and they just kind of integrated. All right, and when I say we don't know what the names of these ancient cities are, and we don't know what the actual inhabitants called themselves, that's because although we found the script, the language has not been deciphered. We found evidence of what we think is writing, but we don't have a way of reading that. So we don't know the language. We cannot decipher the writing. And so really what we're relying on is just archaeological artifacts. All right. And again, this is one of the earliest cultural layers of Hinduism. All right, this is Mohenjo-daro, and this is Harappa. Some say that this structure was used for ancient baths. And again, to think about history of religions and the history of human civilization is that cities and villages, they evolve around rivers. Rivers as a source of life, as a source of trade, as a source of food, irrigation, sanitation. And these are the Indus Valley seals in writing. Go ahead and take a look here and take a guess as to what this says. Has anybody figured it out? If you think you figured it out, you can become world famous. That's because this is a writing that is not yet translated, and we don't have a way to decipher these texts. What we would need is something equivalent of called a Rosetta Stone. We would need to find an example of this language translated into a language that we already know. Ancient Mesopotamian, ancient Egyptian. Then we could work backwards and try to figure it out, but we don't have that. So these are some more seals. Looks like an elephant here. Tools, and these are all the artifacts. Jewelry, and what might this indicate? Well, this might indicate wealth, social status. Dice, and what do we use dice for? Could be games, could be one of the earliest of human activities, which is gambling. Dice were also, and still are, used for divination practices. By divination, we mean ways of talking about and telling the future. This is some ancient pottery. Weight stones, what does this mean? This is for trade, perhaps figuring out the weight, the value of, say, some grains. But for this class, we're mostly interested in religion. So we're trying to figure out the religion of a civilization whose language we don't know. Well, let's take a look at the artifacts and see what we can figure out. All right, so this looks to be here an image of a tree. Here appears to be a tree with some type of spirit within it. So this gets us into the peepal tree. The peepal tree, and I think the Latin is Ficus religiosa, or sacred fig. This is the earliest artistic depiction of a tree, comes from the Indus River Valley. The tree has been used in Indian medicine up until today. There's beliefs long-standing, and these are traditions that continue that we're assuming took place or we're guessing took place back in the ancient Indus Valley civilization. So we have these leaves to ward off evil, curing of disease. In modern day practices, we see traditions where there's a belief that if you water the tree, you can wash away your own sins. The ancient gods and goddesses were thought to abide inside this tree. And it's been significant for all the major South Asian civilizations and religions. This tree is sacred in Hinduism. It's sacred in Buddhism as the tree under which the Buddha obtains enlightenment. The tree is sacred in Jainism. The tree is sacred in Sikhism. And even we find some significance to it in Islam, where sometimes the tombs of great saints in Islam are buried, at least in the Indian subcontinents, under the leaves of this tree. So we have sacred symbols. This is the swastika, later appropriated during World War II by the Nazis with very different intentions in mind, but we see early images of this image, probably used to ward off evil, used for good luck. We see what's called now, what some people call an eternal knot. Amulets and talismans, so objects used to ward off evil. Now, this is something that we have archaeological evidence of, is the burial of the dead. Sometimes it appears that this could be either jewelry or perhaps some kind of good luck charm being tied around the dead. We have pots and vessels indicating perhaps it was a belief in feeding the dead. And very important is the dead in this ancient civilization were always buried with the head facing north. And that again in north in Hinduism becomes an auspicious direction, and the south is considered an inauspicious or unlucky direction. All right, so burial of the head facing north, and here we can see some more of the images of the pots and maybe some type of staff and jewelry. We have early images of what becomes a mythic animal in many parts of the world, unicorn. And then we have all these images that appear to have some type of writing, and we're not so sure. Maybe these were the ancient gods, maybe these were objects of sacrifice, maybe there's symbols of different clans that existed at that time. It's just hard because, again, we don't have a language that's been deciphered. Fire altars, and this would indicate sacrifice. Ceremonial baths, this could have been just for hygiene, but bathing in many religions is a way of purification. And we have just lots and lots of interesting seals. And let's take a look at this next seal. Well, this next image, what do you think we see here? Take a second. This is likely some type of river goddess. And in many ancient religions all over the world, goddesses are associated with rivers. Why? Why would rivers and goddesses be associated? Well, think about fertility. Think about giving life. You know, that's associated with motherhood. So just as rivers spring forth life, gives them certain feminine quality, they're associated often with goddesses. All right, take a look at the image and try to figure out, what do you see in this image? And the answer is, I don't know. This has been debated. Some say that this is a priest. Some say it's a type of god. Some say it's a buffalo sitting in the lotus position. Hard to say. but this has been called later on the Pashupati seal, and this is a lord of animals. This is what late scholars often think. This is some kind of god who has control over animals, and this god will evolve into a later god called Shiva. And what do you see here? The most common interpretation of this is that this is some kind of dancing girl. And dance and religion are very connected in the ancient world. In the old times, you would dance during religious festivals. Maybe you would dance as a performance to gods and goddesses. Maybe you would dance because you were possessed by some kind of god or goddess. This is often how dance, the history of dance and the history of religion are very deeply tied. All right, so this is the building blocks of Hinduism. We see the sacred tree, the peepal tree. We see amulets for protecting against evil. The sacred symbols, such as the swastika and the eternal knots. A pairing of what we think are goddesses and rivers. Sacred directions, with north being with the burial of bodies with the head facing north, indicating that the south is sort of an unlucky direction. Fire pits, perhaps used for sacrifice, bathing, and we think dance. Now, dance could have been a form of entertainment, but often in the olden times, dance, while it could have been used for entertainment and fun, was very much deeply connected with religion. All right, but now, so that's 2500 BCE to 1500 BCE, and the civilization goes poof and disappears. How and why would this civilization disappear? Well, for that, we're going to take a look at a short video. Oh, sorry, this is a little bit of technical difficulties. Well, I'm having trouble pulling up the video, so I will put the video on as a separate link, and the name of that file will be "Why Did the Ancient Indus River Valley Civilization Disappear?" Okay, and stay tuned for our next lecture as we look at one of the oldest religious scriptures of the world, the Holy and Sacred Vedas. All right, well, stay safe and stay well.